One of the most beautiful concepts of Kant's philosophy is his notion of the sublime. Kant develops this concept in the Critique of Judgment, the founding text of aesthetics as a discipline. In this book, Kant concerns himself with a type of judgments different from those that he dealt with in his previous two critiques. The first half of the book is the one that deals with our experience of art and nature as objects of aesthetical contemplation. In this section, Kant positions himself against those philosophers such as Burke, who had developed a theory of our experience of beauty in what Kant would call purely physiological terms. Physiology is opposed, in the language of Kant, to transcendental philosophy. The physiological approach is an empirical method, which attempts to reduce everything to the working of our senses and bodily processes. In opposition, transcendental philosophy seeks the grounds of our experience in its very conditions of possibility. The reason why the transcendental approach is incompatible with the physiological is that matter is itself a phenomenon according to Kant, a mere appearance, which itself finds its conditions of possibility in the noumenical realm. It follows from this that experience cannot have its grounds in our body as understood by biology or anatomy, since these material concepts are themselves already phenomenal, and as such, they need to be grounded by something that lies beyond them. However, we need to keep in mind that the great breakthrough of Kantian philosophy is to dismiss the attempts to find grounds for the material world in an equally ungrounded immaterial reality, such as that postulated by Plato in his theory of the ideas, or the concepts of God and the human soul in the scholastic tradition. Instead, Kant finds these grounds in reason itself, insofar as he views the material world as the product of reason's own conceptual structure, which determines beforehand the nature of our experience of the world. As we'll see, the concept of the sublime refers to a paradoxical phenomenon, an appearance that allows us to glimpse the absolute that is the ground of experience as such. The first concept that Kant concerns himself with in the Critique of Judgment is the concept of beauty. Kant makes sure to trace the limits that distinguish beauty from similar concepts, which in everyday language could be used as synonyms. Some examples are the concepts of what's good, what's perfect, and what's agreeable. Kant claims that beauty distinguishes itself from perfection insofar as what's beautiful in a genuine sense does not arise in comparison to a perfect archetype. For example, we may deem a human being beautiful, but this is only in reference to a socially and historically contingent model of human beauty. A pre-colonial statue of fertility exhibits a very different standard of beauty in a non-Kantian sense to that of a Renaissantist painting of a woman. In opposition, Kantian beauty is a feeling of pleasure that is completely divorced from external burdens. In this manner, beauty is also defined in opposition to what's merely pleasurable in an interested way or what's agreeable. What Kant has in mind is, for example, the pleasure we get when we look at a hamburger. This is not the same feeling we get when we look at a painting. The difference resides in that the pleasure that the hamburger provides depends on our capacity to consume the object, whereas when we contemplate a work of art, its material existence is of no concern for us. In fact, our experience of the painting supposes that we know that the object is an artifice that cannot be snatched out of the canvas in order to satisfy our desires. Unless we are millionaires or art collectors, we don't want to buy Van Gogh's painting when we contemplate it, whereas the pleasure we get from the pair of shoes exhibited in the store depends on our capacity or a strong desire to own them. In this manner, pure beauty is seen as the result of a judgment that is free of all external determinations. What distinguishes this type of judgments with those that were studied in the Critique of Pure Reason is that in the first critique, the faculty of judgment was subordinated to the categories of the faculty of reason. A theoretical approach to a pair of shoes would result in the judgment, "This here is a pair of shoes," thus subordinating the sensual data to the mental category of shoes, insofar as their form or shape conforms to the image in our mind of what shoes need to look like in order to be considered as such. This is what Kant calls an schema, and in this case, the schema of the pair of shoes is to a large extent determined by practical concerns. The shoes need to be designed in such a way in regard to human anatomy so that we can wear them. In opposition, Kantian beauty is also free of this conceptual burden. When we admire a pair of shoes for their mere beauty, reason doesn't determine the sense data under the concept of a shoe, but rather lets their mere presence be what's important. Instead of uttering the judgment, "This here is a pair of shoes," we claim, "This here is beautiful." Having explained our experience of beauty from the standpoint of transcendental idealism, Kant now needs to deal with the other concept that he inherited from Burke. While beauty supposes this idea of something that is pleasing on behalf of its mere form, of its own orderly harmony, the sublime was seen by Burke as something that, while being excessive and even terrible or scary, is all the same an object worthy of intense aesthetical contemplation. The eruption of a volcano could be an example of a sublime object. Kant distinguishes two types of the sublime, which correspond with his distinction between the mathematical and the dynamical. The mathematical is our determination of objects as objects. For example, our determination of sense data as a shoe or any other concept of a substance. On the other hand, the dynamic arises from the categories that seek relationships between substances. For example, our determination of the causes that brought the shoe into existence, the work of the shoemaker, the cows that provided the leather, etc. The mathematical sublime arises when we are confronted with an object, but we fail to grasp it in conceptual terms. Suddenly entering inside a beautiful church could be an example of the mathematical sublime. There are so many beautiful objects that our eyes don't know where to look, and we are left in awe at something that is too vast to grasp all at once. Our glance jumps from frame to frame, unable to produce a complete image of the object. In this failure, reason is confronted with the human idea of infinity. Infinity is a human idea according to Kant, since in nature we only encounter finite magnitudes. Infinity is rather something that human reason introduces to the world. However, the mathematical sublime is a paradoxical phenomenon, because it is the only instance in our embodied existence of an object that makes us confront the idea of infinity. The dynamical sublime is a similar kind of experience, but instead of making us confront the idea of infinity, it makes us realize that we as humans belong to a realm different from that of nature. Examples of the sublime in nature are those powerful events that could end a human life in a second. Facing the sublime object, we have two options. If we feel fear, we are clinging to matter, in the sense that we are worried that the material force of the object will end our physiological functions. If rather we stop to contemplate the object as if it were a beautiful landscape, even if for a brief instance, we are disregarding completely the fact that we belong to the order of causes of nature. Of course, our life is under threat whether this concerns us or not, but we are genuinely confronted with human freedom when we disregard this danger. In this situation, no matter how powerful the natural event is and how easily it could destroy the flesh of the human body, the natural world appears as having no power in relation to the completely ideal realm of human values.